exact same language in Herman Bavinck.
Exactly, and he quotes Bavinck when he uses that. He quotes him, as I remember, in the Dutch, in Bavinck's Reformed Dogmatics, saying this basic same thing. And so, I'm certain that Van Til just thought he was saying what Reformed theologians had always been saying.
I know, and even some of Van Til's friends, contemporary writers, I think particularly of Bob Letham in this connection, are sort of embarrassed or apologetic about that aspect of Van Til's thought, and they try to defend him by claiming lack of clarity. But then subsequent to the publishing of the Bavinck volumes, we find the identical language and, looking at the context, attempting to make the exact same point Van Til's making in an apologetical context.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's one of the reasons that people need not get too bothered about that statement. The point Van Til is making is the right point. But having said that, what he's not doing is saying, now we all need to speak this way. This is a new formulation, and let's all use it. I think that's way, way overstating, and Van Til would have been embarrassed by that kind of understanding of what he was about.
Maybe, since we're talking about theology, maybe you can make a comment upon how theology plays into Van Til's thought, because he was, at one point he was offered a position at Calvin Seminary, I think not to teach apologetics, but to come and teach systematic theology. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right.
And how does systematic theology relate to apologetics in the thought of Van Til? Because he says things that he presumes the Reformed system of doctrine. He doesn't begin with theism. He doesn't begin with a few basic things and then work his way up to doctrine. Rather, he starts from the corpus of Reformed doctrine that's handed down to him and then heads into apologetics. Why is that significant and in some ways unique to Van Til?
Yeah, well, I think that is the most significant point in Van Til that hasn't been adequately stressed until lately, and it's the point that drew me to Van Til 30 plus years ago. That what he's attempting to do is simply take the basic principle of revelation being foundational to everything that we believe and everything that we understand. Take that basic principle and apply it to apologetic methodology. Now, that requires that you have a theology that's applicable with regard to apologetics. Contrast that now with a Thomistic methodology, that is a methodology that some people following Thomas would want to apply. And what Thomas says very clearly is that there are some things about God that can be known by reason alone. And he says, quote unquote, such are that God is one and that he exists. And then there are other things that can be known by revelation. Now, see, what you're doing at that point is, even if subtly, and I understand there are Thomists out there who want to defend Thomas in a bit of a different way, but I don't think it'll wash. What you have there is a kind of methodology where the natural is the foundation for the supernatural. And what the Reformed did, I think rightly here, is began to emphasize again that the supernatural provides the foundation. That is, if we think of the supernatural as God condescending to reveal himself in history, in all of its various forms, and now what we have in the completed canon of Scripture, God revealing himself foundationally, that then provides for us a place on which to stand to do everything, and including apologetics, so that we don't rely on, as Thomas did, the demonstration of the philosopher, capital P, who is Aristotle, but we rely rather on what Scripture says first of all, and move from there to our discussion. So all you have in Van Til, if I can put it simply, but I think nevertheless truly, is that you've got an application of Reformed theology to apologetics. And that's why I say in class, and I would challenge anybody to refute this, including our friends out there who claim to be Reformed but are not following Van Til in their apologetic methodology. If you are Reformed in your theology, you must necessarily be Van Tilian in your apologetic. If you're not, there are significant inconsistencies on one side or the other. And I can't see any other way around that. So our friend R.C. Sproul, who's, I think, the best communicator of Reformed theology in our time, he's got a glitch. It's a significant glitch in apologetics, because at that point, his Reformed theology goes out the window, and he becomes a Thomist. And you don't have that option in the Reformed context. And the Protestant scholastics saw that. Van Til saw that. Princeton didn't see it quite as clearly, and these are generalizations, but I think that's where Reformed theology needs to be more consistently applied, is in that area of apologetics.
Now, Dr. Oliphint, one of the things, going back to the issue of the relationship of Van Til to Protestant scholasticism, several years ago, Sebastian Rainman published a book called Divine Discourse on the theological methodology of John Owen. And I remember reading a section there, I believe of several pages, on what is called the archetype-ectype distinction. And I remember thinking to myself, this is Van Til and his doctrine of analogy in other language. Can you comment on that, Van Til's use of the archetype-ectype distinction?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that's what it is, and I think when you read it in Bavinck, he uses that, and Bavinck uses the language of analogy, and all of those things you see from Bavinck, because he got that from the Protestant scholastics. The basic understanding, and again, I think this is one of those places where Gordon Clark should have been a bit more schooled in Reformed theology and not so much in philosophy. And I mean that. I think he should have just read a bit more, because there's nothing monumental here in terms of some kind of innovation. That is, that God is who he is, and what he knows is exhaustive. And then that's archetypal knowledge, God's knowledge. Ectypal, everything then that God gives to his creation. That is from the type, ectype, from God himself to his creatures. Now, Van Til called that an analogical relationship. Again, he's following Bavinck. I think that's a bad word, because it messes things up with Aquinas and Butler and all these apologists who use the notion of analogy. I think it's rather iconic theology. It's theology according to the image. That is, something that images what is itself the true thing, the archetypal knowledge of God, and is never substantively identified with that knowledge. An image can't be. If you think of a mirror image, it's not substantively identified, although it looks like what it images. And that's why I think it's best to change the terminology there so it doesn't get confused with Aquinas and Butler. But the point is the same. Analogical predication, in Van Til's understanding, not Thomas's now, because Thomas did a good bit on this as well, but in Van Til's understanding, analogical predication just simply means we think and we act and we know as creatures. This is the case in this life, it's the case in eternity. It will always be the case. God thinks and acts and knows as God, number one, and then as God condescended, number two, in that he reveals himself to us and interacts with his creation in that way. So we have to make that distinction fundamental. This is a distinction that has to be made before we talk about any kind of subject-object distinction in epistemology or anything else. It's the most basic distinction that Christians have historically understood, and that I think sometimes gets clouded in the midst of some of these discussions.
So we could suppose that maybe reading the works of Richard Muller, that the Protestant scholastics would have been on the Van Til side of the Van Til-Clark controversy.
Yeah, I think there's no question on that.
Or for those that are great admirers of John Owen, but are questioning Van Til, that Owen would have been a good Van Tilian.
I think so. I don't think there's any question about that. I wrote a paper a long time ago that I haven't done much with since I wrote it, but I remember it struck me. I was writing on Owen's view of Scripture, and it struck me that Owen himself is a fan of and supports and promotes circular reasoning with respect to our understanding of revelation as a basic principium. And he then goes on to show and argue how it is that the Romanists, the Papists as he calls them, they're the ones who are viciously circular in their trust of the Pope, but Protestants have a kind of circularity that has its dependence wholly upon God. And, that's just basic Van Til theology. It just it fits completely, and there's no no surprise there, because what Van Til was doing is what Reformed theology has